Hello and welcome to Core Finance. It gives me great pleasure to introduce onto the show Clive Carver, who's chairman of Caspian Sunrise, formerly known as Roxi Petroleum to a few of our investors. Now, thank you very much for coming in. Let's start off with, it's been a busy year for Caspian, obviously with a name change, starting off with that, but elsewhere, announcements to the market, and I think you had three kind of key achievements that you wanted to reach this year. Just quickly talk us through those.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me. I think the three things we were keen to achieve this year, first of all, was the merger with Bavistock. The second was to get at least one of our deep wells flowing. And the third is something we've achieved ahead of time, which actually is to agree the terms of the licence renewal, which expires next summer. So going through them one by one, the importance of the merger with Bavistock was to unite the assets. So we now have 99% of the B&G asset, all under the same roof.
In Kazakhstan? In
Kazakhstan, which is the flagship asset and the focus of the company for the time being. That means that obviously we control that asset with 99% and we can operate it as we think best. We're not constrained by the slowest person to raise cash to do further development, so therefore the timing of the development is under our control. And also it took away any perceptions of conflicts because our chief executive had a private interest as well as the company having a public interest. That's all come together.
Fantastic.
And that was done without the exercise of the issue of any cash or raising of any cash. We did it on a share-for-share basis, and now we actually took the opportunity to convert 10 million of debt into equity. So that was the first achievement. The second achievement is to get one of the deep wells flowing, and that is A5. About 10 days ago, we announced that we had flowed it at the rate of 3,500 barrels a day, and we are anticipating putting it on a 90-day flow test in the next few days, and we'll make an announcement when that's happened. The third thing that we did, as I said, was the licence renewal early, and that one I think there's been a bit of confusion because it's quite technical. Most of the time when you renew licences, you renew them for the whole field, and it's all or nothing, so you move from exploration, appraisal to production. If you do that before you've developed all the different areas, there's the danger you have to forfeit some of the acreage that you haven't drilled as part of the appraisal basis. So we've got the best of both worlds. We can move structure by structure those that make sense. So particularly MJF, which is our shallow field, which has got 5 producing wells. We'd anticipate moving that and possibly the deep Airshigol, if A5 and A6 are working by then, excuse me, next summer as planned. But with the others, then we have an additional 6 years if we need it, very unlikely we need all of that, to roll out the development plan. So we're not giving anything up, and that puts us in a much stronger position. And
you mentioned 6 years on the licence, and that's an appraisal as well?
That's an appraisal, so the whole field's been extended for 6 years on an appraisal basis. We have the ability to pick and choose which structure to move forward to full production. So that in practice means moving from a domestic price of about $20 a barrel to possibly 35, 40 after taxes. So it makes a huge difference to the economics.
Fantastic. And we saw last week the share price moving steadily upwards, driven, I think, by the A5 results more so than the licence agreement.
Definitely. I think we have been talking for a long time now about getting these wells flowing. So it's not surprising that the market wanted to see it happen before there was a reaction. So that's perfectly understandable. What I would say is we have 2 more attempts to get the other 2 working before Christmas. And personally, I'd be disappointed if certainly by the licence renewal next summer that we hadn't got both of those flowing as well.
Super. And you mentioned 3,000 barrels per day. At this point, you've obviously got the 90-day, and you'll update the market as that comes through. What's your target for the region? What is to be expected? What is a reasonable expectation for that region? What are we saying? Kind of 10,000, 20,000, 5,000? Where are we looking?
Well, I think if we look at what we've drilled already, if we look at what we've drilled already on the shallows, I think what we've drilled already, assuming 146 is as good as the rest of them, would probably give us a capacity on the shallows alone somewhere around about 4,000 barrels a day. Then you look at the deep wells. Each of the deep wells potentially can do more than 3,500, but let's say 3,500. Very quickly, if you get at least a couple of the deep wells working, you're into double figures, you're 10,000 plus there. So that is an objective. And then it's a question of the number of wells drilled. Because if we start doing infill drilling in some of these structures, then we would anticipate a higher incidence of success, and therefore you're adding to the production.
And how much of that is reliant on further capital expenditure? And if you do need more capital expenditure, will you be going to shareholders, or do you have enough cash flow now within the company to facilitate?
It really depends on the pace at which we want to roll things out. If we want to, we can take the income from the wells that we've already got and producing, which steps up and doubles next summer.
Super.
So if you look at a 3,500 barrel a day well, that can be more than $40 million in a year. These deep wells we're drilling are only 10 million to drill. So if we wanted to, we could do that. We're inevitably going to have to spend some money on infrastructure, and that is usually fundable via debt. So we're in the position where we don't need to raise equity to achieve our plans, but we wouldn't rule it out, because if there's a way of doing it and meaning bigger returns, that's a possibility.
Certainly if it's commercial for yourself and shareholders.
But I would say for the time being, we're very much looking to fund things on the pre-sale of oil, as we have done for the last few years. The objective we have is to maximise the return to shareholders, which the other way of looking at that is minimising dilution.
And talking about maximising returns, you could be at a stage, if everything goes to plan and flowing well, you could start paying a dividend.
It's certainly the intention to be dividend paying within a couple of years, and you look at the turnaround in the finances when you start selling serious quantities of oil at world prices, and probably less than the amount you're spending on drilling, you suddenly become very profitable, and the logical thing to do with that cash is to share it with shareholders.
Super. And are you able to sell the oil at world prices, or you contractually have to sell it at lower levels
until
locally?
the licence renewal comes through? We have to sell at domestic prices, which have been around about $16 a barrel. They're nudging up to about 20, and that is part of the condition. There are no material taxes on that, so that's the price you get. If you sell at the world prices, I'm assuming conservatively we'd end up somewhere between about 35 and 40 barrels net.
Fantastic. That all sounds very good. And with regards to that going well, and in Kazakhstan as well, and operating BNG, surely at some point some of the big players, or even medium-sized players, will be looking at the company and saying, look, we're not present in this area. This is a great opportunity to get a foothold by potentially taking out Caspian. Is that something you're aware of in the industry?
I'm certainly aware it's a realistic possibility. If we look at the industry as a whole, I think the bigger companies haven't spent what they traditionally spend on exploration over the last 5 to 10 years. You would have thought that would mean when they're reviewing their portfolios, they're going to see a gap. If you have a gap, then you need to fill it somehow. You can't go and put time back and drill in the past. Therefore, our advantages are we've got 99% of the assets, we control the asset. The asset is in very familiar oil and gas territory, lots of infrastructure there. So if they were looking for something with proven reserves by that time, which can be delivered, you would assume they would knock on the door. We're not waiting for that to happen, but I think it will happen at some point. I think the focus is to become financially strong, dividend paying, and if it happens, then it's a bonus for everybody.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a good point to end on. Clive, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you.